The war on the Eastern Front began with the Austrian invasion of Serbia in July 1914. It would progressively grow to encompass a vast geography from the Baltic to the Black Sea, and from the Carpathian Mountains to the Caucasus. On paper, the Russian army was a formidable force. It had at its disposal 1.2 million men, organized into 70 infantry and 24 cavalry divisions. It possessed an arsenal of almost 7,900 field guns, howitzers, and heavy guns. The German General Staff referred to it as the Russian steamroller. It seemed, at least on paper, that their fears were well placed. The Schlieffen Plan had assumed that it would take the Russian military a minimum of 6 weeks to mobilize its troops. In that period, he had reasoned the German military could knock France out of the war before then turning to deal with the Russians. In less than 3 weeks, however, the Russian First and Second Armies had begun to advance into East Prussia. The German military had always anticipated the possibility of a rapid Russian advance. This advance had started earlier and was more rapid than expected. In a panic, the General Staff brought General Paul von Hindenburg out of retirement and transferred General Erich Ludendorff along with 3 corps, 75,000 men, from the Western Front. Badly outnumbered, Hindenburg and Ludendorff decided to attack each of the Russian armies in turn. In Tannenberg, they surrounded the Russian Second Army and over 7 days systematically destroyed it. Out of a force of 180,000 men, 60,000 were either killed or wounded. 100,000 were captured and 10,000 escaped. The Battle of Tannenberg remains one of the most lopsided victories in the annals of warfare. The 2 German generals then turned their attention to the Russian First Army. Hindenburg attempted to outflank the Russians and surround them in the area of the Mazurkan Lakes, but they were able to execute a fighting retreat back to the protection of their border forts. The battles of Tannenberg and the Mazurkan Lakes was a triumph for the German Eighth Army. In the space of a month, they had destroyed the Russian Second Army, badly mauled the Russian First Army, and ejected all Russian troops from Russian soil. The Russians fared better in the south. Under the command of Generals Nikolai Ivanov and Alexei Brusilov, Russian armies overran most of Galicia in Austrian Poland and pushed Austrian forces back 100 miles to the Carpathian Mountains. Stymied by the lack of progress on the Western Front, the German General Staff decided to make the Eastern Front the main focus of their efforts. In May 1915, German and Austrian forces launched the Gorlice-Tarnow offensive in Galicia. The campaign turned into a broader, unified offensive that resulted in the total collapse of the Russian lines and the retreat of Russian forces well into Russia. Austrian Galicia was recaptured, and Russian forces were pushed back to the Ukrainian frontier. In the spring of 1916, responding to desperate French pleas to help in relieving the German pressure on Verdun, the Russians prepared to go on the offensive. In command was General Alexei Brusilov, a competent old-style commander. His main targets were the region of Russian Poland occupied by the Germans in 1915 and the Austrian-Hungarian province of Galicia. The assault into Galicia achieved a spectacular breakthrough. The decimated Austrian 8th and 9th armies fell back towards the Carpathian Mountains. More than 200,000 prisoners were taken, many of whom were Slavs who willingly deserted and joined the Russian army. Austrian morale received a blow from which it never fully recovered. By the end of September 1916, just before the onset of winter, the Brusilov offensive finally petered out. The Russian army was so war-weary that it could just not sustain the continuing losses. In 3.5 months, The Brusilov offensive had cost Russia casualties of between 1 and 1.25 million men. Equally staggering, it had cost Austria-Hungary and Germany casualties of over 1.3 million men. The Imperial Russian army was shattered and, like the population at large, rife with discontent with the government and with the royal family. Russia was on the verge of revolution. At the start of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire, often referred to as the sick man of Europe, was in a state of terminal decline. Nominally ruled by the Turkish Sultan Muhammad V from Constantinople, effective political power was in the hands of the Turkish war minister Enver Pasha. Its far-flung provinces had increasingly been carved off by various European powers. On August 2, 1914, the Ottoman Empire signed a secret Ottoman-German alliance in which the Ottoman Empire pledged to enter the war on Germany's side one day after Germany declared war on Russia. The war with the Ottoman Empire would stretch from the Sinai to Persia and from the Caucasus to the Arabian Peninsula. One campaign in particular, however, would come to define the war between the Allies and the Ottoman Empire: Gallipoli. Early in 1915, in response to the ongoing stalemate on the Western Front, Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, proposed a military operation to seize the Turkish Straits, the complex of waterways consisting of the Dardanelles, the Sea of Marmara, and the Bosporus that connected the Mediterranean Sea via the Aegean with the Black Sea. The original plan called for a combined land and naval operation to seize the Ottoman forts guarding the straits and force the passage to Constantinople. Safely anchored in the Golden Horn, Constantinople's historic anchorage, the big guns of the Royal Navy would intimidate the Ottoman government into submission. Control of the straits would open up a southern route to ship supplies to the Russian forces on the Eastern Front. In addition, the Black Sea was Russia's principal export outlet for its annual wheat crop. Success at Gallipoli, it was believed, would result in the defeat of the Ottoman Empire and knock them out of the war. The Minister of War, Lord Kitchener, reluctantly agreed to the plan. He insisted, however, that the attack be limited to the Royal Navy. The Dardanelles is 38 miles long. At the Aegean entrance, the straits are 2 miles wide and were guarded by several Ottoman forts manned with 16 heavy and 7 medium-range guns. The straits progressively widened to about 4 miles before narrowing to less than a mile at the Narrows, about 14 miles from the entrance. There, the Ottomans had placed 72 heavy guns and laid 8 separate belts of mines. Once past this gauntlet, the Allied fleet could proceed to Constantinople with little opposition. The attacking force consisted of the Royal Navy's newest dreadnought-class battleship, Queen Elizabeth, with 8 15-inch guns, and the battle cruiser Inflexible, with 8 12-inch guns. In addition, there were 12 British and 4 French pre-dreadnought-class battleships. The attack plan was straightforward. The fleet would proceed to the entrance and use the big guns to destroy the forts. With the entrance secured, the fleet would proceed to the Narrows and, again using long-range gunfire from the naval guns, destroy the forts. Under cover of the bombardment, the minesweepers would clear away the mines and allow the fleet to proceed to Constantinople. The term minesweeper was a misnomer. The ships were actually civilian fishing trawlers. The bombardment began on February 25th. By the morning of the 27th, the forts were overcome and the fleet proceeded to the Narrows. In the Narrows, there was a powerful 9-knot current flowing toward the Aegean. The trawlers made little forward progress and were unable to clear any of the mines. On March 18th, Rear Admiral John de Robic decided to proceed through the Narrows and guns blazing, attacked the forts regardless of the minefields. By the afternoon, the Ottoman big guns began to fall silent. De Robeck now ordered the French battleships to withdraw to the rear and ordered British battleships to take their place. As the French battleship Beauvais was steaming south, she struck a mine and promptly sank with a loss of 600 men. In short order, the British ships Inflexible, Irresistible, and Ocean all hit mines and were badly damaged. Unable to proceed, de Robeck recalled his force and withdrew. That should have been the end of the operation, but missions sometimes take on a life of their own. Kitchener now reversed himself. He ordered a new attack by a combination ground and naval force under the overall command of British